Welcome back to Reddit Whispers. It all started in a way that feels almost cliché now, like the opening scene of a movie I've seen 1,000 times but still can't turn off. October last year. The air was just starting to get that crisp edge to it, the kind that makes you want to pull someone closer, to find a warmth that isn't just about the temperature. I met her at a friend's bonfire. One of those sprawling, chaotic backyard gatherings where you know about a quarter of the people, and spend the rest of the night navigating introductions that you'll forget by the time you grab another drink. I saw her across the flickering flames, and it was another one of those cliches, I know, but it was like the firelight was made for her. It danced across her face, catching in her eyes, making them seem deeper, more ancient than the casual, laughing conversation she was having. I was a magnet and she was true north. I didn't even think about it. My feet just started moving, carrying me through knots of people, past conversations about work and weekend plans until I was standing there, probably looking like a complete idiot just waiting for a gap, an opening. She turned, maybe feeling my stare, and she smiled. It wasn't a polite, dismissive smile. It was genuine, a little curious, and it lit up her whole face. That was it. That was the moment the hook was set. We talked for what felt like 5 minutes but must have been hours because people started to leave. The fire dwindled to glowing embers, and the chill in the air was no longer a pleasant suggestion but a direct order to find shelter. We talked about nothing and everything. Music, terrible jobs we'd had, a shared, inexplicable love for old black and white monster movies, the way the city looked at night from the top of Miller's Ridge. It was effortless. The conversation flowed like we were picking up a thread we'd left dangling years ago. There were no awkward pauses, no desperate lunges for a new topic. It was just easy. And in that ease there was an excitement, a thrumming energy that told me this was different. This wasn't just another bonfire, another forgotten name. This was a beginning. The next few weeks were a blur, a montage of firsts. Our first real date at a tiny Italian place with checkered tablecloths and Chianti in a straw basket, where we shared a tiramisu, and I got a smudge of cocoa on my nose that she wiped away with her thumb, a touch so light and natural it felt like we'd been doing it for a lifetime. Our first movie, one of those monster flicks we'd talked about, in a nearly empty theater on a Tuesday night. I remember the smell of her perfume, something subtle like vanilla and rain, more than I remember the plot of the film. We held hands, our fingers intertwining like it was the most practiced, instinctive thing in the world. We just clicked. It's a simple phrase, but it's the only one that fits. Every piece of me seemed to find its corresponding part in her. My quiet tendencies were balanced by her gentle extroversion. My cynicism was softened by her optimism. She laughed at my dumbest jokes, not out of pity, but with a real, throaty laugh that made me want to be funnier, to be better. We spent nights just driving, with no destination, the city lights smearing past the windows as we built a world for ourselves out of words and shared silences. We learned each other's histories, the small triumphs and the quiet heartbreaks that had shaped us. She told me about her childhood dog, a scruffy terrier named Patches, and cried a little when she described the day he got old. I told her about my dream of one day building a cabin by a lake, a dream I hadn't spoken aloud to anyone before, and she didn't laugh. She asked what kind of wood I would use for the floors. It was that kind of connection, deep, immediate, and utterly consuming. Then came the holidays. Christmas was bearing down, and with it, a sense of permanence started to creep into what we had. It wasn't just a string of dates anymore. It was the default. My evenings were her evenings. My weekends were our weekends. We went shopping for a Christmas tree, arguing playfully over the merits of a Fraser fir versus a Douglas fir, and ended up with a slightly lopsided spruce that looked so pathetic and hopeful we couldn't leave it behind. Decorating it was an exercise in beautiful chaos. We got tangled in the lights, drank too much mulled wine, and hung ornaments with stories attached, each one a little piece of our separate pasts that we were now weaving together. Christmas Eve we spent with her family. I was nervous, of course. Meeting the parents is a rite of passage designed by a sadist, but they were warm and welcoming, and seeing her in that context, surrounded by the people who had made her who she was, only made me fall deeper. I saw the way her father looked at her, the pride and adoration in his eyes, and I thought, I get it. I completely get it. Christmas morning was just the two of us in my apartment, with the lopsided tree and a pile of presents that were more thoughtful than expensive. She'd got me a rare, worn paperback of a book I'd mentioned once in passing, a book I'd been trying to find for years. It was such a small thing, but it screamed that she listened, that the little details I let slip weren't just lost to the ether. They were caught and held and remembered. I gave her a delicate silver necklace with a tiny, stylized wave for the pendant, because she'd told me the ocean was the only place that made her feel both vast and insignificant in the best possible way. Lying there on the floor, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and the scent of pine, with the winter sun streaming through the window, it felt perfect. It wasn't just a feeling, it was a certainty, a solid, unshakable belief that I had found my person. And that's when the conversation had to happen. My job. It had always been the elephant in the room, the little asterisk at the end of every future plan we tentatively made. I work in specialized geological surveying, which is a fancy way of saying I go to the middle of nowhere for months at a time and help drilling companies figure out where to drill. It's lucrative, but it's a life of transience. A life lived in temporary camps and remote locations, far from Christmas trees and cozy apartments. I had a contract coming up. A big one. 3 months in a remote part of Alaska. I'd known about it since before I met her, but I'd pushed it to the back of my mind, hoping, I suppose, that it would just disappear. But it hadn't. It was real and it was imminent. I had to go in January. We were sitting on my couch, the festive glow of the tree casting long shadows on the wall when I told her. I laid it all out. The duration, the location, the almost non-existent communication. I explained that I'd have a satellite phone for emergencies and a weak, unreliable internet connection at the main camp that I might be able to access once a week if I was lucky and the weather was good. I watched her face as I spoke, watched the light in her eyes dim just a little. She didn't get angry. She didn't cry. She just listened, her expression thoughtful, her hand resting on my knee. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a siren. I was holding my breath, bracing for the end. We'd only been together since October. 2, maybe 3 months. It was new, it was fragile. A 3-month separation with virtually no contact was a death sentence for a relationship this young. I wouldn't have blamed her for walking away. I probably would have in her position. But she didn't. She finally turned to me, her eyes clear and serious, and said she wanted to try. She said what we had was worth waiting for. We talked for hours that night, making plans, setting rules. We would try to call. A video chat if the internet gods were smiling. We would keep it going. We made promises. Promises to be patient, to be understanding, to remember the feeling of that Christmas morning when things got lonely and difficult. We held on to each other, a silent acknowledgement of the storm we were about to sail into. The days leading up to my departure were precious, each one counted and savored. We crammed a year's worth of experiences into a couple of weeks. We went ice skating, even though we were both terrible at it, and spent more time laughing on the ice than actually skating. We had a marathon of all the classic monster movies, judging them on a ridiculous scale we invented. We took a drive to the coast and walked on a freezing, windswept beach, the gray ocean churning under a gray sky. It was beautiful and melancholy all at once. The last night was the hardest. We didn't do anything special. We just ordered a pizza and lay in bed, talking, memorizing the feel of each other, the sound of each other's breathing. It was a desperate, futile attempt to bottle the moment, to have something to sustain us through the empty months ahead. The next morning at the airport was a blur of fluorescent lights and sterile announcements. It felt surreal, like an out-of-body experience. We stood at the security gate, the final barrier. There was nothing left to say that we hadn't already said 100 times. I love you, I'll miss you, be safe, call me. The words felt small and inadequate. I hugged her, burying my face in her hair, trying to brand the scent of her into my memory. The hug lasted for as long as we could stretch it, a silent, desperate plea against the inevitable. Then I had to let go. I walked away, forcing myself not to look back, because I knew if I saw her standing there, I wouldn't be able to get on the plane. As I sat at the gate, waiting to board, I felt a profound sense of dread. It wasn't just about missing her. It was a deeper fear, a cold knot in my stomach that whispered about the fragility of what we had. We were trying to keep a flame alive in a hurricane. We had made our promises, we had our plan, but out here in the cold reality of the departure lounge, it all felt like wishful thinking. The relationship was so new, so fresh. We were still learning each other's rhythms, the nuances of our personalities. We hadn't had our first big fight yet. We hadn't faced any real tests. And now we were willingly walking into the ultimate test, a trial by distance and silence. I was asking her to put her life on hold, to wait for someone who, for all intents and purposes, was about to become a ghost. A voice on a crackly phone line, a few sentences in a delayed email. The confidence we'd felt on the couch, wrapped in the glow of the Christmas tree, felt a million miles away. All I had was the memory of her smile and a hope that felt dangerously thin. The boarding call echoed through the terminal. It was time to go. I took a deep breath, stood up and walked down the jet bridge, leaving behind the best thing that had ever happened to me, praying it would still be there when I got back. The plane took off, and I watched the city shrink below, the grid of lights becoming a constellation until it was swallowed by the clouds. I was alone, rocketing towards a frozen wasteland, clinging to a promise that already felt like it was stretching to its breaking point. The journey was long, a series of connecting flights from one progressively smaller airport to another, until the final leg was on a tiny bush plane that felt like it was held together with duct tape and a prayer. The landscape below transformed from the familiar patchwork of civilization into an endless, intimidating expanse of white. Snow, ice, and the jagged black teeth of mountains. It was starkly beautiful and profoundly isolating. It was a world away from her. When we finally landed, the cold was a physical shock, a slap in the face that stole my breath. This was my new reality. A camp of prefabricated buildings huddled together against the elements, a population of rough men who spoke in grunts and smelled of diesel and stale coffee. The work was grueling, physically demanding, and mentally numbing. Long days of taking readings, analyzing data, and battling the relentless cold. It was an environment designed to grind you down, to strip away everything but the immediate task at hand. And for a while, it worked. The exhaustion at the end of each day was a welcome anesthetic. But in the quiet moments, in the brief space between shutting down the equipment and succumbing to sleep, she would rush into my mind. Her laugh, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the warmth of her hand in mine. And the ache of missing her would be so intense it was a physical pain. Our communication was exactly as bad as I had feared, if not worse. The satellite phone was a joke. The connection was so full of static and delay that conversations were reduced to shouting single words and hoping the other person could piece them together. "Are you okay?" "Yes, fine, love you." It was a frustrating, heartbreaking pantomime of intimacy. The internet was even more of a mirage. Weeks would go by with no connection at all, and when it did flicker to life, it was so slow that a single email could take an hour to send. We tried a video call once. Her face was a pixelated mosaic, her voice a series of robotic squawks, frozen in a perpetually buffering nightmare. We gave up after 10 minutes, both of us more frustrated and lonelier than when we started. The failure of technology to bridge the gap between us was a constant, grinding source of misery. It was a reminder of how truly far apart we were, and as the weeks wore on, the strain began to show, not in what we said but in what we didn't. The gaps between our sporadic communications grew longer, and I have to be honest here with you and with myself. It was my fault. The work was all-consuming, and I let it be. The isolation started to work on me, creating a kind of emotional inertia. There were days, whole weeks even, when I just didn't have the energy to fight for a connection, to spend an hour trying to send an email that would probably never arrive. I would get back to my small room, the weariness settling into my bones like a disease, and the thought of the effort it would take to reach out felt monumental. So I wouldn't. I'd just collapse into my bunk and let the silence win. I'd tell myself it was better this way, that trying and failing was more painful than not trying at all. I told myself she would understand, but a part of me knew that was a lie. I was ignoring her. I was creating a silence that I knew must be deafening on her end. In her world, life was going on. Her friends, her job, her family. I was the ghost, the absent variable. When I didn't call, when I didn't write, what was she supposed to think? I knew it must be worrying her. Was I okay? Had something happened? Or worse, had I just stopped caring? I was cocooning myself in my work and my exhaustion, using it as an excuse to shut down. I was being selfish. I was breaking the promises we had made. There were moments of guilt, sharp and stabbing, that would cut through the fatigue. I'd see something, a particularly spectacular view of the northern lights, or a rare Arctic fox darting across the snow, and my first instinct would be to want to share it with her. And then the crushing realization would hit me that I couldn't. And in that moment, the distance felt infinite. The guilt would churn in my gut, but instead of spurring me to action, it often just pushed me further into my shell. It was easier to ignore the feeling, to bury it under another 12-hour shift, than to face the reality of what my silence was doing to us. The relationship felt less and less real, more like a memory of a dream I once had. The vibrant, living thing we had created that winter felt like it was being freeze-dried, all the color and warmth slowly leaching out of it. And I was letting it happen. I was so wrapped up in my own little bubble of misery and self-pity that I failed to consider what it must be like for her, back home, waiting for a sign of life from a man who had essentially vanished. She was left to fill in the blanks, to stare at a silent phone and wonder if we were still even a we. I was focused on surviving the 3 months, on getting through the contract. I had my head down, pushing forward, thinking we could just pick up where we left off. I didn't realize, or didn't want to realize, that relationships don't work that way. They aren't machines you can just switch off and on. They need to be tended, to be nurtured. And I was leaving ours to starve in the cold. Finally, April arrived. The contract ended, and the process of leaving that frozen world began. The journey back was the reverse of the one I had taken, a slow, jarring transition back to civilization. With every flight, the world got a little louder, a little brighter, a little more crowded. The sense of anticipation was a physical thing, a nervous energy buzzing under my skin. I was excited, desperate to see her, to hold her, to feel that connection again. But there was also a seed of anxiety. Had I done too much damage? Had my silence created a chasm too wide to cross? Was the person I left at the airport still waiting for me? I called her from the first real airport I reached, the connection clear and immediate. Hearing her voice without the static and delay was a jolt. It was so real, so familiar. It was home. She sounded happy, relieved. We didn't talk about the long silences. We just focused on the now, on my return. The logistics of picking me up, the plans for the evening. It was a conversation of normalcy, a deliberate stepping around the giant, awkward elephant in the room. I wanted to believe it meant everything was okay, that we could just slide back into how things were. And when I finally walked through the arrival's gate and saw her standing there, that belief became a conviction. She looked even more beautiful than I remembered. She ran to me, and I dropped my bags, and we just crashed into each other. That hug was everything. It was an apology, a forgiveness, a reunion, all without a single word. It felt like coming home after being lost at sea. In that moment, holding her, breathing her in, all the anxiety, all the guilt, all the loneliness of the past 3 months just melted away. We picked up where we left off. That's the only way to describe it. It was seamless. We fell back into our old rhythm so easily it was like I had never been gone. The first few weeks were a honeymoon phase, a rediscovery of each other. We were inseparable. It was better than before I left. It was as if the distance, as painful as it had been, had crystallized my feelings for her. I had seen what life was like without her, and I never wanted to experience that again. I was all in, more than I had been before, and she was perfect. She was literally everything I had ever wanted in a girlfriend. It wasn't just that she was beautiful, though she was, stunningly so. It was everything else. It was the way she cared for me. It wasn't just in grand gestures. It was in the thousand tiny things she did every day. The way she'd make my coffee in the morning exactly how I liked it, without me ever having to ask again after the first time. The way she'd put her cold feet on me under the covers and I'd pretend to be annoyed, but secretly loved it. The way she'd listen, truly listen, when I talked about my day, asking questions that showed she was not just hearing the words but understanding the meaning behind them. She showed she cared, and I mean she really, really showed it. It wasn't just performative. It felt real bone deep. She seemed to anticipate my needs before I even knew them myself. If I was stressed, she'd create a space of calm around me, putting on my favorite music, suggesting a walk, just being a quiet, reassuring presence. If I was happy, she'd celebrate with me, her joy amplifying my own. She was my biggest cheerleader, my softest place to land. She made me feel seen, truly seen, in a way no one ever has before, and I felt her love for me. It wasn't just in the I love yous, though there were plenty of those. It was in her touch, in the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. It was a look of pure, unadulterated affection. It was a look that said, "You are my person." I was basking in it, soaking it all in. Life was good. Life was great. We were building something real, something solid. The past 3 months of silence and distance felt like a bad dream, a necessary trial we had passed to get to this. We had made it. We had survived. I was completely, unequivocally in love with her, and I truly believed she felt the same way. The future seemed bright and simple. I was home, she was here, we were together. That was all that mattered. The doubts I'd had on the plane, the guilt I'd carried in Alaska, it all seemed like a distant memory, irrelevant to the beautiful reality we now inhabited. I had everything I'd ever wanted. I was happy. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy. And then one ordinary Tuesday evening she shattered it all into a million pieces. We were in the kitchen making dinner. I was chopping vegetables. She was stirring a sauce on the stove. The radio was playing some indie band she loved. It was domestic, it was comfortable, it was perfect. And then she turned off the stove, the sudden silence amplifying the quiet hum of the refrigerator. She turned to me and her face was wrong. The smile was gone. Her eyes were full of something I couldn't read, something that looked a lot like fear. "I have to tell you something," she said, and her voice was small, fragile. My blood ran cold. Those are the words that precede the end of the world. My mind started racing through 100 horrible possibilities. Was she sick? Was she leaving me? Was she unhappy? I put the knife down, my knuckles white. "What is it?" I asked, my own voice sounding distant and strange. She took a deep breath, the kind you take before you plunge into icy water. She wouldn't look at me, her gaze fixed on a spot on the floor somewhere between us. And then she said the words. "While you were away," she started, and every muscle in my body tensed. "That time when we weren't talking, I hooked up with someone. The world didn't end. It just stopped. The sound of the refrigerator, the faint music from the radio, the smell of garlic and tomatoes, my own heartbeat, it all just ceased to exist. There was only her voice hanging in the air and the sentence she had just spoken, replaying in my mind on an endless, torturous loop. I hooked up with someone, hooked up with someone." The words were simple, clinical, but they landed with the force of a physical blow. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me, like I was falling through an endless black void. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could feel was this white-hot, blinding pain erupting in my chest, a pain so intense it was physical. It radiated through my entire body, making my hands shake and my vision blur at the edges. It fucking killed me. In that single moment, every beautiful thing we had built since my return turned to ash. Every laugh, every touch, every shared secret was now tainted, poisoned by this revelation. The image of her, my perfect, caring girlfriend, the one who made my coffee and warmed her feet on me, was instantly superimposed with the image of her with someone else. A faceless, nameless stranger. And the two images warred in my mind, creating a nauseating, cognitive dissonance. I stared at her, waiting for her to say it was a joke, a horrible, twisted, unfunny joke. But she was just standing there, her body rigid, her face pale, tears starting to well in her eyes. It was real, this was happening. My beautiful, perfect reality had been a lie, or at least it was built on a lie. The silence in the kitchen stretched on, thick and suffocating. I felt 1,000 emotions at once. Rage, betrayal, confusion, and a grief so profound it felt like a death. The person I thought she was, the relationship I thought we had just died in that kitchen. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there with a half-chopped onion on the cutting board in front of me and felt my entire world crumble. She started talking again, her voice thick with tears, trying to explain. The words came out in a rush, desperate and pleading. Her excuse, her reason, was that when I was away, she was so unsure about us. She didn't know where we stood. She talked about the silence, about the days and weeks that would go by without a word from me. She said she didn't know what kind of person I was, really. We had only been together for a couple of months before I left. She didn't know if I was serious, if I was the kind of guy who would just disappear and never come back. She talked about how my silence worried her, how it ate away at her confidence in us. She'd stare at her phone, waiting for it to ring, waiting for a message that never came, and with each passing day the doubt grew. Was I okay? Or had I just moved on? She felt alone, abandoned. She thought maybe we were already over and I just hadn't had the decency to tell her. So one night, a night she described as a low point, a night full of loneliness and too much wine with a friend, she made a mistake. She hooked up with someone. It was a one-time thing, meaningless, a desperate attempt to feel something other than the gnawing anxiety and loneliness that my absence had created. She said it meant nothing, that it was over before it even began, and that the guilt had been eating her alive ever since, especially since I came home. She explained that when I got back and we were so good, better than ever, she truly fell in love with me. She saw the man I really was, and she realized the depth of her feelings, and that made the guilt unbearable. She said she couldn't live with the lie anymore, couldn't build our future on a foundation of deceit. She had to tell me, even though she fucking knew, that it could be the end of us. She told me this fully knowing that I could walk away and never talk to her again. And God, I wanted to. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn around, walk out that door, and never look back. To erase her from my life, to cauterize the wound and pretend she never existed. The pain was too much. The betrayal felt absolute. How could she? The woman who looked at me with such love, who cared for me so deeply, how could she have been with someone else? My mind was a hurricane of angry, wounded questions. Who was he? When did it happen? How many times? The details felt both critically important and utterly unbearable. I didn't ask, not yet. I couldn't form the words. I just stood there, the initial shock giving way to a cold, hard rage. A rage that was all the more potent because a part of me, a small, honest, hateful part of me, knew she was right. I had ignored her. I had left her in silence. I had created the very uncertainty that she said pushed her to this. And that only made me angrier. Angrier at her for doing it, and angrier at myself for my role in it. The perfect, simple narrative of our love story was gone. Now it was messy, complicated, and ugly. And as I looked at her, crying, pleading with her eyes for me to understand, I felt a flicker of something else beneath the rage. Sincerity. As much as I wanted to dismiss her words as just a convenient excuse, I couldn't. I could feel the truth in her pain. Her confession wasn't a strategic move. It was a desperate, self-destructive act of honesty. She had willingly placed a bomb in the middle of our perfect life and handed me the detonator. She was giving me the power to destroy her, to destroy us. And for some reason, that act of handing me the power, of making herself so completely vulnerable, stopped me from walking out the door. It didn't stop the rage, though. Oh no, the rage was just getting started. In the days and weeks that followed, I put her through hell. I unleashed every ounce of my pain and anger on her. I became a different person, someone I didn't recognize, someone cruel and vindictive. I called her down to the absolute lowest. I used words as weapons, crafting them to hurt, to cut, to make her feel a fraction of the pain I was feeling. I called her a liar, a cheat. I dredged up every insecurity I knew she had and threw it in her face. I dissected her character, her morals, her worth. I wanted to break her. I wanted her to hurt as much as I was hurting. And she just took it. She never fought back, not really. She would cry, she would apologize, she would just stand there and absorb the blows. She put up with everything I said to her. She would just repeat over and over again like a mantra that she was sorry, that she loved me, that she would do anything to fix it. I would flip on her at a moment's notice. We could be having a perfectly fine day, almost feeling normal again, and then a thought would pop into my head. An image of her with him, a line from her confession, and the rage would come roaring back. I'd bring it up out of the blue, in the car, in the middle of a movie, at a restaurant. I'd needle her with it, asking for details I didn't want to know, just to watch her squirm, just to reopen the wound. It was a vicious, toxic cycle. I would wound her, she would bleed, and then I would feel a temporary, hollow sense of satisfaction which would quickly be replaced by a wave of self-loathing. I was being a monster, and I knew it, but I couldn't stop. Pain was a living entity inside me, and this was the only way I knew how to let it out. And through it all, she was unwavering. She vowed that she really, really loved me. She kept trying to explain her mindset at the time, not as an excuse, but as a reason. That she was unsure about us, unsure about the way I was acting, or rather, not acting. She told me again and again that when I came home, everything changed for her. The doubts vanished, and she saw the future she wanted, and it was with me. She said she truly fell in love with me in those weeks after I got back, and that she loves me to death now. And the crazy, frustrating, infuriating thing is I believe her. I legitimately feel it. Her actions, outside of my venomous tirades, have been nothing short of perfect. She treats me awesomely. She's patient, she's kind, she's more attentive than ever. It's like she's trying to make up for her mistake with every single action she takes. She walks on eggshells around me, constantly gauging my mood, terrified of setting me off. And I hate that I've made her that way. Things between us in the moments when I'm not actively torturing her with the past are really great. The connection is still there. The laughter is still there. The love is still there, buried under layers of anger and resentment, but it's there. And that's what's tearing me apart. I have these two completely contradictory realities existing at the same time. In one reality, I have this amazing woman who loves me more than anything, who is devoted and caring and everything I ever wanted. In the other reality, I have the woman who betrayed me, who was with someone else while I was working my ass off in the middle of nowhere thinking of her. And I can't reconcile the two. I can't let the past go. To this day, I will still bring it up sometimes. The anger will just bubble up out of nowhere, a bitter taste in my mouth, and I'll say something sarcastic, something cruel. I'll see the flash of pain in her eyes, the way her shoulders slump, and a part of me feels justified, while another part of me feels like the biggest piece of shit on the planet. Am I a piece of shit for calling her down and putting her through all that? For still punishing her for a mistake she made when we were barely a couple, when I was the one who went silent? We were only really together for a month, maybe two, before I went away. Was it even a real relationship at that point? Was it fair to expect that level of loyalty when I wasn't providing the communication to sustain it? I just don't know how to feel about it. One minute I want to forgive her, to move on and just embrace the good thing we have now. The next, I'm consumed by the betrayal, by the images in my head, and I want to hurt her again. I see the sincerity she showed in confessing. She could have lied, I never would have known. She chose the hard, painful truth. Does that count for something? Does that make it forgivable? Or does it just make her an honest cheater? She messed around on me. I came back, didn't know a thing, and she was the one who admitted it. She chose to give me the truth, and since that day, since that horrible confession, she has done everything in her power to prove her love and her commitment. She has taken my abuse, she has weathered my storms, and she is still here, still loving me, still trying. The things we have now, the day-to-day life, it's genuinely great, but it's haunted. It's haunted by this one event, and I'm the ghost. I'm the one who keeps rattling the chains, who won't let it rest. So I'm just here, wondering what other people think. What's your opinion on a situation like this? Can you build a future on a foundation that cracks so early on? Can you forgive something that fundamentally changes how you see a person? Or am I just a fool, clinging to something that was broken from the start and being an asshole in the process? I love her, I really do. But sometimes I look at her and all I can see is the lie she told by omission, even if just for a little while. And then other times I look at her and all I see is the woman who loves me, who takes my shit, who is trying so hard to make us work. And I'm just stuck in the middle, swinging between those two poles, and I don't know how to find solid ground. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear from you what moment in your life made you see someone for who they truly were. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Reddit Whispers, where the real stories get told.